We're continuing our journey across the central tablelands of New South Wales. I'm next to the mighty Cudgegong River here in Mudgee. I'm Madeleine, and this is the Cellar Door Australia. Located 270 kilometres west of Sydney, Mudgee is nestled in the picturesque Cudgegong River Valley and has built a reputation as one of the country's great wine towns. It's home to many well-preserved colonial buildings, including the Mudgee Post Office, designed by architect Alexander Dawson and built in 1862. It's also home to a vineyard that has produced one of the most awarded Australian reds ever, Mountain Blue. I'm visiting Yeates, home to this rich history, to learn about how they've revitalised this historic vineyard through ecologically sound management. I'll also be checking out their new cellar door and, of course, trying their delicious wines. But first up, I'm meeting Sandy and Vicky to see how it all happened. Sandy and Vicky, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a gorgeous day, gorgeous property. I'd love to hear about your journey of where you started and how you've ended up here.
We actually were cattle producers.
We wanted to complicate the process of just going down to the bottle shop and buying a nice bottle of wine. And if you want to do that, you buy a vineyard. And vineyards are cantankerous beasts. On this vineyard, there was at one stage 25,000 vines, and they all wanted different things.
We're both from Sydney, and then it was one Saturday morning about 12 years ago, I just happened to notice this particular vineyard was for sale because Foster's were selling all their New South Wales vineyards at the time. Mm-hmm. And I just mentioned it stupidly to Sandy.
What a good idea, I thought.
This could be an opportunity to buy a vineyard.
We got to the stage where I'd been in the cattle industry 40-something years, and at some point we sat down and said, well, you know, which of our children is interested in cattle? And the answer was 0. And we thought, well, you know, it was an opportunity to just try something different. And at that stage, we'd already purchased the vineyard, but really didn't know where we were going to take it. So we sold the property, sold the cattle, dispersed the herd, moved into Mudgee.
Yeah. And
just trying to deliver beautiful grapes to make really lovely wine is a bit of a challenge. There's a lot of dotting of I's and crossing of T's, and lots of vignerons know all about it.
It's a labour of love.
Yeah, and they were old vines, and they were planted by a local German family back in 1968. They are challenging, but make beautiful fruit.
Speaking of which, let's go for a wander. So we're in the middle of the block here. What kind of vines are we looking at?
These are 30-plus-year-old Shiraz grapes and vines, and you can see that they've all coloured up, ready for picking in probably 3 weeks' time.
Wow, yeah. So we're pretty close.
We are. We're in the last leg of a long race.
Yeah. What does the beginning of the season look like?
We've had an interesting season here. We've had hail through this area over a number of vineyards, and we've also had rain right through the early part of the season. And rain has presented every grape grower around here with certain challenges in controlling things like downy mildew and powdery mildew. But the weather we've had in the last 3 weeks has actually saved us. So we've had moderately warm to hot days, and this breeze that we're experiencing now is just drying out anything, so it's all good.
And in the actual grapes themselves, what are you looking for in a Shiraz grape?
Well, you know, like big long bunches like this one, with some structure to it, so that the grapes are well spaced out and that they're even in size. by luck, I probably picked the nicest bunch on this vine. The berries are quite loose, and they're still going to expand and swell in the next couple of weeks, so you don't want the berries being too tight, because if moisture gets in there, you can get botrytis. Great, it's a killer for anyone growing grapes, botrytis.
Don't want to have any of that
No,
involved.
we don't.
And what about the skin? Is it quite thick at this point? Thin?
Look, we use nutritional sprays to enhance the structure of the skin. Basically calcium, but and silica. So the stronger the skin and the better the bunches are spaced out, the better they're able to resist any sort of challenges from the weather in the next the final ripening phase.
Do you want a close-up?
And can you try this one and you tell them
Probably
That
fine.
is
it
so
tastes like?
delicious.
It's a bit sour and it's not ripe.
I think it's about time to taste these grapes in their true form, back in the brand new Cellar Door. And now it's time for my favourite part of every episode, the tastings. Sandy, I'm so excited to experience all these wines with you. Where are we starting?
Well, we can start anywhere really. I pulled out a bottle of rosé because it's a segment of the wine market which is growing so rapidly right around Australia. You know, everybody wants to drink rosé. So, you know, we're running a very traditional vineyard here. When we bought it was Shiraz and Cabernet, and since then we've planted 2 whites. And then just in the last couple of years we've been producing rosé, which comes from some of our Shiraz that you've seen outside, and some Sangiovese that comes from another vineyard in Mudgee. So this is it.
And what can I expect to taste and experience in this first sip?
A degree of sweetness and fruit flavour, and more recently across Australia, I think there is a move toward the drier end. So this colour is a sort of lovely soft colour, which is attractive to a lot of people that come here. And it's got a nice aroma. Well, I don't know whether you'd like to just sniff it and sip it.
To have a sniff.
But variously described as sort of rose petal colour and nose, a little honeysuckle blossom, and a nice clean acid finish. So it's not tacky sweet. And I think our customers across Australia, but particularly here that we meet in Mudgee, really are up for a drier style rosé, and that follows through to Riesling and also Chardonnay of all things, because Chardonnay has moved a lot over the years.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is the rosé.
That is delicious. I really feel that's quite a refreshing taste too.
Well, it's a lovely summer drink, isn't it, rosé? And on a hot day, I mean, red wines have their place, but maybe not in 30-degree heat in the middle of the day.
You can start in the day with a rosé and work towards the reds at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is such a gorgeous colour, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere, there's more Cellar Door after the break.
Whilst filming the Cellar Door at Mudgee, our crew chose to stay at Evansley Luxury Boutique Accommodation. Exclusive, private and quiet, yet only moments from town, Evansley is the perfect place to unwind for a weekend. Nestled along the Cudgegong River, the property is great for a romantic getaway or a relaxed break with family and friends. Additional offerings such as in-room massages, private wine tastings and a pool for the summer months and fires for the cool ones add to Evansley's allure. To book your stay, head to evansley.com.au.
Out in the vineyards, it's harvest time for the family, and it's all hands and all paws on deck. Handpicking ensures the skins of the grapes aren't damaged during harvest. If pierced, grape juice can be damaged by oxygen even before it's reached the fermentation tanks. Picking grapes is not only more gentle on the grapes, it protects the vines. Mechanical harvesters collect grapes by shaking the branches so all the grapes fall into a bin. It's efficient, but it can also hurt the vines. Harvesters can't distinguish between ripe and unripe grapes and pick all of them at once.
So the hail just, back in January, just hit them when they were really hard, green little berries, and they just shrivel. And they'll drop off at the de-stemmer when they go to the winery. Some of them are actually split, and they're more of a worry because the split ones can weep, and they weep sugar down the outside of the skin.
It's not just picking the vines that's a labour of love, it's all the work that goes into restoring and maintaining them.
So what was the place like when you bought it? What did the vines look like?
Well, there were a lot of them, that I remember, and they were quite old. In fact, a very good friend of mine, who's a winemaker in the Yarra Valley, looked at the vines and said, "Don't buy this, Sandy," because the vines were so old, and there's the thing called trunk disease, which is a problem of age and hygiene in management. So we knew that there was challenges afoot. We totally underestimated the challenges that did arise in the subsequent years.
These ones were all planted in 1968 by the Roth family, who were fairly prolific around this area. And what we wanted to show you here is an example of what we've had to do with some of these old vines. Dad has spent a lot of time cutting off each vine to remove the trunk disease. Sometimes it hasn't always been successful and we've had to retrain some younger shoots, or we've had to layer. So that means taking one of the existing canes, burying it down and waiting for it to reshoot to get some fresh tissue. So there's been a lot of work through the vineyard in trying to make sure that all the little holes that you see where we've lost vines are filled. And we're very good at then accidentally cutting them off again once we've done that. So we've done it multiple times.
Tractor passes. Yeah.
Here's another example over here where we've had to do the same thing, where a cane has been buried under the ground and layered and reshot, and we retrain that one up to the trellis. This old fella over here, it's got a little bit more gnarly, this one.
Yeah, this one's showing its age. You can see under here it's all rotten. Trunk disease there and over here. This is pretty, it's just rotten wood. But miraculously, somewhere in here is a surviving vascular system that is supporting all this foliage and all these grapes. So they're survivors. The trunk disease starts at the end of the shoots or the cordon and travels all the way to the crown and then down. Very hard to get a new shoot from the bottom because it's 54 years old, or get any sort of way to rehabilitate that spot. We can cut it right off and replant, but then it's competing with older vines beside it. A lot of the older vines that are planted here are succumbing to the same problem. And in the Hunter and just about every wine region in Australia has problems with trunk disease. And so it's an enormous challenge. But we're just plugging away with it. You know, when you explain it to people, it doesn't seem a lot. But I think of the hours and the time that's been spent in rewiring and doing all the work on the vines. Yeah. And it's just starting to pay off in the last few years, last 4 or 5 years. The quality of the grapes and the wine is just, on the rise. But the first 5 years was very unsatisfying. It was just, 1 foot, at a time. Progress was slow, but now you feel confident in what we're doing.
It's clear that all this hard work restoring these vines has paid off. Time to try one of Yeates' signature wines out in the courtyard.
So I'm here with Edwina and we're enjoying a beautiful glass. Can you tell me about what we've got here?
Yeah, for sure. So we have the 2017 Shiraz Cabernet blend of about 28% Cabernet and the rest is Shiraz.
Lovely. So what can we expect to taste when we take a sip?
All our reds are sort of medium to full body, but this one's on the nose, pretty spicy and Christmassy, so a bit of cinnamon in there as well. Very fruit forward. Nice red berry fruits, a little bit of blue fruit as well.
Sounds delicious. I bet it tastes delicious too.
Yeah, it does. Let's have a go.
Yeah. That is a really, very different to the other ones that I tasted.
Yeah, I think the Cabernet just sort of, brings it all up, gives it a
out.
big lift, adds a bit of complexity to it all.
And Edwina, you're part of the family. So what do you do here at the winery?
Yeah, a little bit of everything, really. We've opened the Cellar Door, and it's a pretty full-time gig these days. So we have 2 accommodation spaces. One just behind you in the gatehouse and another upstairs. So the accommodation certainly keeps us busy. And then the Cellar Door, Mum and I are pretty well running that. So, when you're used to office work and being outside and talking to people, and I'm a bit of a traveller myself, so, meeting new people every weekend and, it's fun.
And getting to share your passion with great wine with people
of course.
as well. Well, I'm very much enjoying it, so cheers
good.
to that.
Well, cheers, thank you.
Cheers.
Rosemount owned this vineyard from the early 90s, and they made this magnificent wine called Mountain Blue. So then it passed into South Corp and Foster's hands, and things got a bit out of control. But it was, just a unique vineyard, and it's on the doorstep of Mudgee. It's, so close. It was the time when we bought it, nobody wanted to buy vineyards.
Here you are, still standing.
Something tells me it was a good idea.
How easy it was to go into the bottle shop and just buy a bottle. But it is quite precious to be able to offer people that come to stay with us some of our own wine.
Yeah.
It's getting better. It's nicer as the wine quality improves.
The move also led to a significant lifestyle change for the family.
Would you ever have thought those many years ago that you would end up here?
My mother would be rolling in her grave if she knew I was serving behind a bar.
She would be too.
Well, onwards and upwards.
It's a really important role to be custodians of lovely old vines. They're some of the oldest in Mudgee. And it would be horrible for it to end up in housing blocks or. So we're trying as a family to work out a way of keeping in the family, but we've got to be realistic at the same time that it might not be possible. It's a lot of work involved.
Back in the vineyard, I'm learning more about Sandy's focus on restoring these vines.
So Madeleine, as we walk along, you might see some dark material here. This is some compost that was laid down. When under the vines, there's no cultivation on the vineyard anywhere. It's totally managed organically. And this dry grass will mulch down, and it'll be just part of the ecosystem that is mid-row and under the vines. We're not discriminatory at the moment. We've got some nice pasture that's growing in the mid-row, and under here it's anything. There's lots of weeds, and that is a bit of, that's clearly a weed, but we can't be too picky what grows here. We've just got to be able to control them. So we're able to keep the grass down, and if we keep the grass down, we have better movement of wind and air under the vines in this last final, period of ripening. If you get obstruction to that air movement, it is conducive for disease.
So it's a little bit more effort, but well worth it.
More effort, and at the end of the day, being an organic producer, wherever you are and whatever you do, is going to be more expensive. Because there's so many, the modern chemicals now are so good, it makes life a lot easier to do things. So we're turning our back on that and trying to be more sustainable.
Yeah. What do you see the benefits are in being more sustainable?
The first benefit is that we have no exposed soil. So we have 100% ground cover on this vineyard, all 20 hectares, and the grass, it protects the soil from being overheated and encourages microorganisms and little insects and worms and things like that to live happily here, and all that is part of producing healthy grapevines and beautiful grapes. Sarah does a lot of work in the vineyard, and she is sort of like a vineyard slave like I am, so she knows the work that goes into getting weeds out from underneath the vines, and we've been working on that for a couple of weeks, haven't we?
And it is always hard to find methods that aren't the quick fix. You know, the long sustainable method is always usually the hardest, but we have been trying to endeavour not only for the fruit, but, you know, a bit of a moral obligation to do the right thing by this vineyard as well, and to try and regenerate the soils as much as possible.
Well, we often have this conversation about decarbonising, and there's still a lot of challenges. We're doing the right thing by the soil, by the grapevines, but that also involves more tractor passes, and of course tractors consuming diesel, and there's more, you know, that's a cost. The diesel's a cost. On one hand, we're doing all the right things by the vineyard, but on the other hand, more tractor passes, more diesel, more emissions. So where's the happy balance? And a lot of people in this business are saying, well, we're going to cheat a bit. We're going to be organic, but we're going to use some chemicals that are safe chemicals in order to reduce the number of tractor passes. We haven't got to that stage, nor do we want to, but at some stage, it's always a challenge to use smaller machinery that have lower powered engines and lower emissions, so that we're trying to creep toward that carbon. That's the goal, carbon neutrality.
It's an ever-evolving, ever-changing landscape, isn't it? Because new technology might arise and might be fantastic. You need to get Tesla out here to make some electric lawnmowers.
I think the challenge is to retrofit tractors with batteries or hydrogen or something. I don't know what will happen, but we need to do it quickly.
It's clear Sandy is dedicated to an ecologically safe approach to growing his grapes. It must be a labour of love. Speaking of which, it's time for me to get back to my labour of love, drinking the wine. To top off my visit, Sandy's showing me the 2018 Jack Roth Shiraz.
These wines predate the smoke taint year that we had in 2020, where we didn't pick any, we just dropped the bunches on the ground. So that lined up against the rosé shows the depth of character in its lovely Shiraz 2018. It's lovely bright colour, and if you just swirl that gently around, it's got the most beautiful lift in the aromas that are in the wine.
And what kind of flavour notes would I be expecting when I take a sip?
Well, typically with Shiraz around here, you would pick up a little savoury note, maybe some black pepper. In terms of fruit, it would be typically blackberry, plum, sometimes cherry, depending on the year. So they're all the interesting things in a young wine, and of course it's always a joy to present to people some older wines as well. So, you know, over 3 vintages they get a bit of a handle on what happens, how the wine develops in the bottle with a bit of age. We like to encourage people to buy some 18 and maybe drink a bottle in the next week or so, but to have some extras so they put them in a nice hidden spot for drinking later on, because this is right across Australia. The 2018 vintage was a cracker, and that wine is right up there with them.
And people can have this secret treasure that they've forgotten about and rediscover years down the track.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that. That's got a lot of character to it.
Yeah.
It's, again, very easy to drink.
That is the wine that's sort of flag bearer for the work we've done in the vineyard. Just each year it's been getting better.
Well, those were very special wines. Thank you so much for showing them to me, Sandy.
That's a pleasure. There's more there, but I think you were short of time.
Yeah, I've got to come back.
Yeah, good. Well, you'd be very welcome.
It's been a great trip to Mudgee, but there's plenty more to see across New South Wales. So tune in next time for the Cellar Door Australia. If you want to catch up on any of the past 7 seasons of the Cellar Door Australia, you can. Tune in on YouTube or CTV+.